Welcome to WhiskyCast, cask strength conversation featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie, and this is episode number 1173 for August 2nd, 2026. Coming up in a few minutes.
It's a lot of fun, I would say, with all its positives and negatives and challenges, but we love what we're doing, and it's just when you like what you do, you don't work, you just have fun. So, yeah, I wouldn't complain.
Sam Filmus is the founder and president of ImpEx Beverages, the San Francisco-based importer for Kilchoman, the Glenallachie, Nc'Nean, and other whiskeys from around the world. Lately, he's also branched out into independent bottling with the ImpEx Collection, an annual release of whiskeys built around a theme. For instance, this year's collection focuses on wine cask finishes, a nod to Sam's early days as a wine importer. I'll talk with Sam and taste a couple of his whiskeys on this week's WhiskyCast In-Depth. We'll also have Behind the Label and much more. It's all ahead on this week's WhiskyCast, whiskey's longest-running and most awarded podcast series. Let's get started with the news. It's brought to you by Doers. Sazerac is not giving up in its bid to acquire Brown-Forman. The privately held company sent a new offer to Brown-Forman and members of the Brown family, offering to pay $32 a share for Brown-Forman and asking them to reconsider their initial rejection. Brown-Forman and Wolf Pen Branch, the collection of Brown family members who control a majority of the company's voting shares, brushed off the $15 billion bid a second time, issuing a statement that the company is well positioned to deliver long-term value for all shareholders. Sazerac says it's ready to improve on the terms of the offer if Brown-Forman's board will consider it in the first place. We haven't reported much on the problems at Republic National Distributing Company, which up until recently was the second largest spirits distributor in the U.S. RNDC filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy this week and has been shedding regional businesses in recent months. The company has more than $1 billion in debt, including $400 million in unsecured claims, and reportedly has not been paying suppliers for several months. Republic went into Chapter 11 owing Proximo Spirits almost $94 million. And other familiar names on the unsecured claims list include Pernod Ricard, Luxco, and Gallo. That could be an issue for smaller producers of whiskeys and other wines and spirits, since Republic was their only route to market in many states. In other news, several whiskey makers reported quarterly earnings this week. LVMH's Moet Hennessy unit reported a 3% increase in cognac and spirits sales, including Glenmorangie and Ardbeg scotches. Proximo Spirits, which owns Bushmills and Proper No. 12 whiskeys, reported a 6% decline in quarterly sales and is down 9% for the year after a record-setting loss in the first quarter. The spirits unit that includes Bushmills and Proper No. 12 was down 17.6% in value sales during the quarter. Campari Group beat analyst expectations with a 2.5% growth in sales during the quarter ending June 30th. And cognac sales helped push Remy Cointreau to a 1.3% gain in revenue for the year so far. Remy's unit that includes Bruichladdich and Westland whiskeys was off by 6.6% during the last quarter. Family-owned Glenfarclas doesn't have to worry about quarterly earnings reports and things like that. The Speyside distiller celebrated its 190th anniversary this week with the release of Glenfarclas 190. It's the final release in the anniversary trilogy and features whiskeys from the last 5 decades. Glenfarclas 190 will be available at select UK and global retailers starting this month. There's no word on pricing. Beyoncé is doubling down on her investment in the whiskey business. She's bought out partner Moet Hennessy and takes on full ownership of Sir Davis American Whiskey, which was first released 2 years ago. Financial terms of the deal were not disclosed. Sir Davis is distilled at MGP in Indiana, but blended and bottled in Beyoncé's hometown of Houston by blender Cameron George. The whiskey is named after the singer's great-grandfather. Ireland's Great Northern Distillery has signed a long-term supply contract with China's Tsingtao Brewery. Tsingtao plans to introduce a range of Irish whiskies in China, and Great Northern will supply whiskies from 3 to 21 years old for the venture. And Jameson has signed a deal to become the official spirits sponsor of the NFL. The partnership will include Jameson becoming the presenting sponsor of the Super Bowl pregame concert and global reach through the NFL's international games starting this season. We have a correction to report from last week's episode. In our story on the new Four Roses 100 proof, we reported that it's destined for the bar and restaurant trade and will not be available at retailers. We got word after the episode dropped that Four Roses misspoke. The 100 proof expression will be available at retailers with a recommended retail price of $29.99 a bottle. Suntory has unveiled its annual limited edition releases for 2026, with Story of the Distillery releases from both Yamazaki and Hakushu, the return of Hibiki Blossom Harmony, and the Hibiki Japanese Harmony Masters Select Lunar New Year 2026 edition. Prices range from $320 to $380 a bottle through Decanta. Penderyn has released a 25-year-old single malt whiskey dating back to a year after the Welsh distillery's founding in 2000. Just 420 bottles are available at 1,200 pounds each. Indiana's Starlight Distillery is releasing a 10-year-old bourbon to celebrate the distillery's 25th anniversary. The whiskey comes from non-GMO grains grown on the Starlight Distillery farm. Just 100 bottles will be available starting this weekend at the distillery. Middle West Spirits is rolling out 3 10-year-old Old Elk whiskeys. There's a bourbon, a wheated bourbon, and a wheat whiskey in the lineup. All 3 were distilled at MGP under the supervision of former master distiller Greg Metz, but Middle West has since moved production of Old Elk to its distillery in Columbus, Ohio. Deutsch Family Wines and Spirits is introducing a new Bibb & Tucker bottled in bond Tennessee bourbon. It's aged for 8 years and goes through the Lincoln County charcoal filtering process. It's distilled at the Tennessee Distilling Company and was created by apprentice blender James Joseph under the tutelage of master blender Alan Kennedy. It'll be available starting next month with a recommended retail price of $64.99 a bottle. Douglas Lang & Company is out with batch number 3 of its Strathern Highland single malt. The whiskey comes from both inherited stocks and whiskey distilled under Douglas Lang's ownership, with just 31 casks used for the final whiskey. Batch 3 uses a slightly higher percentage of ex-sherry casks in the blend, along with ex-bourbon and virgin oak. It's available through whiskey specialist shops for 65 pounds a bottle. Wisconsin's Dancing Goat Distillery has introduced the new Stillman's Sonder brand with 2 whiskeys, a bourbon matured in Andean oak and American oak barrels, and an American single malt finished in a combination of virgin oak, ex-bourbon, Wisconsin brandy, cognac, and Calvados. Both are available for $70 each. Suntory Global Spirits is out with the 4th annual release of Old Overholt Extra Aged Cask Strength. This year's edition is an 11-year-old unfiltered rye whiskey bottled at 62.8% ABV. It'll carry a price tag of $109.99 a bottle. And finally, senior citizens in Minnesota can now enjoy happy hour at the nursing home. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz signed the so-called Grandparents' Happy Hour bill into law the other day. It allows nursing homes and assisted living facilities to serve alcohol to residents and invited guests without needing a liquor license. Under the previous state law, they couldn't serve alcohol at all. You can keep up with the latest whiskey news all week long at WhiskyCast.com and in the WhiskyCast community app. The news is brought to you by Dewar's.
Throughout the years, Dewar's has created some incredible whiskeys. But our new Dewar's 12-year-old, that one's a personal favorite. It's the kind of scotch that earns praise from the pros, but still feels right at home in the middle of a good night with friends. Every pour opens up with notes of vanilla, toffee, baking spice, in a smooth oak finish. It's rich, it's approachable, and it has a way of bringing people together. Whether it's around the table, the fireplace, or just wherever the night happens to take you. Look, The glasses may hold the whiskey, but the whiskey? That's what holds the moment. Please enjoy responsibly. Copyright 2025 Dewar's is a trademark. Imported by John Dewar & Sons Company, Coral Gables, Florida. Blended Scotch whiskey, 40% alcohol by volume.
Let's open up the calendar now and see what's happening around the world of whiskey. It's Tasmanian Whiskey Week in Australia, with events going on all over the island this week. Whiskey Fringe is this coming weekend in Edinburgh, Scotland. Little Wolf Pub in Denver, Colorado has an evening of fun with the Blue Dime Cabaret this Saturday night. Bourbon's Bistro in Louisville has a log still distillery dinner with founder Wally Dant on the 12th. And the Fraser History Museum in Louisville has an evening of bourbon, bluegrass, and history the next night on the 13th. Sagamore Spirit Distillery in Baltimore, Maryland has its monthly Whiskey on the Waterfront party on Saturday the 15th. And the Brandy Library in New York City has a Japanese whiskey spirit school class that same afternoon. Finally, Moonshine University in Louisville has a Stave and Thief Society Executive Bourbon Steward course on the 24th. If you're organizing a whiskey event, let us know about it. We'll add it to the calendars at whiskycast.com and in the WhiskyCast community app. WhiskyCast In-Depth is brought to you by Glenallachie Irish Whiskey. Sam Filmus emigrated to the U.S. from his native Moldova in 1991 and started importing wines from Eastern Europe shortly after that. He switched to importing whiskies a few years later and founded ImpEx Beverages to import brands like Signatory, Edradour, and Kilchoman into the U.S. 5 years ago, Sam turned to the world of independent bottling his own casks under the ImpEx Collection label. Each year's edition has a specific theme. For instance, his newly released Collection 5 focuses on wine cask finishes, harkening back to his early days as a wine importer. I talked with Sam this week on a Zoom call. First of all, let's talk about the import business. How are things with the end of tariffs now on most of your import items?
Well, I'm sure our suppliers and ourselves feel a big relief because those tariffs been like a bone in our throats for a long time. So that's very good news. Hopefully it is not going to change back to what used to be.
What did it cost you to pay these tariffs?
Well, we kind of had a unique agreement with our suppliers, and we basically absorbed them 50-50. So 5% of it was 10% tariff, 50% of 10% would be covered by our supplier, and our portion would be another 5%.
So that way it wasn't passed on to the consumers.
That's exactly why we wanted to make sure the end consumer is not affected by that.
How is the import business going these days?
Market, it's a lot of fun, I would say, with all its positives and negatives and challenges. But we love what we're doing, and it's just when you like what you do, you don't work, you just have fun. So, yeah, I wouldn't complain.
You are probably best known as being the importer for Kilchoman. That's a brand that you've had a long-standing relationship with going back since almost the beginning, right?
Absolutely. We were the first and the only U.S. importer of Kilchoman. We brought it in 2010, and we just recently celebrated 20th anniversary, which I can't believe the Kilchoman is 20 years old, and also our 15th anniversary of being their U.S. importer.
What has having that consistency meant to you?
Meant a lot because looking back, when Kilchoman showed up as a new guy on the block, when we had already 7th greatest distillery out of the Isla, it was challenging. The price was in many cases the same or even more than Ardbeg 10 or Lafroig 10. And we were with a new, Isla, no age statement, had some challenges. And I I would say it took us probably 2, 3, 4, 5 years before when we were doing tastings. We would ask, have you heard of Kilchoman? And they would say, oh, yeah, we've heard of Kilchoman. That was a huge, huge compliment to our hard job, hard work that we've done. Feels great because right now it's, for Islay people, for people who like Islay whiskies, that's kind of go-to, and we get a lot of compliments. And of course, it's not us who makes the whiskey, but us kind of maybe taking advantage of popularity of the Islay style that 7 distilleries at that time generated was beneficial. But right now, I think Kilchoman has its own kind of a house style that a lot of people enjoy, and we enjoy them enjoying it.
You have also become known for importing other world brands, such as Indri and Pochino. How do you find these spirits to import, and what does it mean to you to be able to be the U.S. importer for them?
While Scotch portfolio is kind of in our hearts, and we bring in the whiskey from each and every major whiskey producing region of Scotland, I thought not having what some other countries can offer as their maybe one of the best or best single malts would be missing something for our consumer. Our consumer is very curious. It's very interested to see what the difference would it be in their glass when the whiskey is, matured in the hot climate regions versus four-season Scotch. So we're very excited about bringing the whiskeys from India, from M&H distillery in Tel Aviv, Spirit of Yorkshire distillery out of England, Yorkshire, Pochino, as you mentioned, from Australia, because they all give you different styles and profiles and different stories, and we love stories. We think story sells whiskey.
How so?
Well, because people, you've been in this kind of a sphere for a long time, and some people would go with what their dad and maybe grandfather used to drink, 12-year-old, whatever. But there's a good amount of people, good kind of a spectrum of people who wander and who are open to explore something, but not just 12-year-old Glenlivet, for example, which is a great whiskey. So they're curious. So our kind of idea is to take him through the journey of people who are behind this distilleries, for people who are making the whiskey, for how this idea came, what kind of sustainable methods they use, what's their goals, what's behind it, and if we are able to carry the story and deliver it to the consumer, I think it's 50% success of sales.
You recently made the decision to become an independent bottler as well with the ImpEx Collection. Tell me about the process that went into that.
Sure. So, as you may know, that I started my career as a distributor of independent bottlers, specifically Signatory, and then they bought Edradour, so I represented that for a good number of years in California as a distributor, and then Gordon MacPhail and Ardnamurchan joined, and while it was very difficult to have people understand the concept of independent bottling, because they would always ask why this label doesn't look like a Macallan label. And I'm not talking about consumer, I'm talking about even people who are in the industry and trade. At some point, I was distributing like Heather and other independent bottlers. And then the exclusive malts, which David Sirk and I kind of brought in to the United States and made what it made, where people coming to the store and asking for specific exclusive malts. That was happening for 7 years. And then it came to the end as the brand was bought by some big club or rich people from the East. And that kind of, took me a couple of sleepless nights to kind of see what is going to happen next, because I'm developing those brands and bringing them to the level that I feel like people enjoy it and they look for it. And for whatever reason, I lose them. Could be many, many reasons. And but that was kind of a trigger of me making a decision to come up with my own independent bottler line. And since our company's name is ImpEx Beverages, I thought ImpEx Collection would be the way to name the distillery, to name the line. Sorry, I'm losing it. So that's how the idea came, Mark.
Well, your staff sent me some samples of your latest collection, and you've done a lot with wine barriques, it looks like, in finishing these.
Sure. So Mark, basically, I do one edition a year. So we started in 2021. So this is edition 5. Edition 4 was all about the juice, about the distillate, about how to prevent the distillate and then whiskey to be affected by wood. So you would see the bottles from edition 4. They're all like Sauvignon Blanc color, second fill, Huck's Head, et cetera, which didn't make him appealing on a shelf, but the idea was to show people the DNA, the distillate type or style or profile that is not covered or overpowered or by some wood influence. So that's why edition 5 was a little bit different, because I'm trying to rotate things so people don't get bored by drinking the same or similar whiskey. So this one, yeah, you're right, and thank you for noticing it. All of them would have some sort of a wine cask influence.
I'm looking at the Nc'Nean 14-year-old from 2010, finished in a Margaux red wine barrique, and I'm nosing it right now. It's very jammy. So
what I'm also trying to bring with this edition is the stories about the whiskey distilleries, because the first one was Linkwood. A lot of people know Linkwood. Nc'Nean, not as many people know Nc'Nean, but it is it's a Highland, but to me it tastes like a Speyside. So to maybe for people to discover something interesting. Yeah, I agree. It's jammy. They got some floral aromas. I got this kind of silky tannins there.
And the taste is wonderful.
Thank you. Yeah. It's one of my probably top 3 Highland distilleries in terms of being favorite. But this one, the wine barrique gave it kind of additional layer of complexity, which brought it for me to another level.
What are your other favorite Highland distilleries?
I like Blair Athol and I like Glenallachie. But it doesn't mean that I don't like others, but those are kind of my go-to if it comes to Highland.
Glenallachie I can understand, but Blair Athol doesn't get a lot of attention.
Yeah, you're right. I feel that it's my fault as well, because a lot of times when I go to Scotland, I would go to Edradour to shake hands to my very good friend, Andrew. And Blair Athol is like 10 minutes away from Edradour, and for whatever reason, it's just they'll never have time to stop by. But I think the whiskeys they produce, I like the oily texture in whiskey, and I think because they have a shorter stills and kind of wider stills, they do that. I've tasted a good number of Blair Athol expressions brought by other independent bottlers, and we brought one, a 15-year-old sherry cask in the previous, I think it was edition 3. And as much as I try to rotate things so that it will be the same distillery, I like this one as much as I just said I need to bring it. So.
What excites you about whiskey these days?
If I would go with number one would be stories. So I like when the whiskey takes people together, and sometimes it would be like some serious stories, sometimes be anecdotes, but it's something that unifies people and make them relax and be more open to what's going on in their lives, to maybe share some incident that they had 10 years ago, 20 years ago. I think that's the most exciting thing for me in whiskey.
And what's driving you nuts these days?
Oh, man. I hope your listeners would not be offended or something. When people say Indian single malt Scotch or whatever, and I never correct them, but it's not Scotch, right? Even though it's made the same way or whatever. Another thing doesn't drive me crazy, but when people say not Auburn but Obama, again, I never have a luxury of correcting them for that. But I think today's people more like educated, and they have a more probably possibility to visit the distilleries and talk about that. And Auburn is every Costco you come in, every specialty liquor store. It's just something. But again, it's not like driving me crazy. It's just sometimes I'm thinking it's best if they know how to pronounce it, or they pronounce it right.
What do you see as the future for your collection? I assume you're working on next year's already.
I started, but so far, the most difficult thing for me is to say no, and I say no to a lot of casks. But it's a passion project for me, so it's not something that somebody tells me you need to bring 5 pallets of it this year, or you need to hit a certain number of cases or whatever. It's just if I come across a good cask that I feel will excite and please a lot of discerning palates, I bring it. So I don't know what is going to be next. I'm trying to bring some different categories of whiskey, so it wouldn't be just single malt. For example, I try to bring blend, and then the conversation starts from there, like whether it's a blended malt or is it blended whiskey, and what's the difference, like this kind of stuff. Grain whiskey is always of interest because you can probably get a pretty old grain whiskey for a very affordable price, reasonable price. So that's always an interest. It's probably depends, Mark, on what I'm coming across to see if it qualifies.
Well, let me pull another sample. You mentioned blended malts. You got a Burnside blended malt from 2011, 14 years in a Chateau Latour barrique.
Yeah, sometimes the cask's probably worth more than the whiskey, believe it or not. But yeah, that does, as you probably know and your listeners know, that's a first growth Chateau Latour, which is it's been like that for the last 170 years. It's still there. I think and the lighter style of the whiskey itself, which was teaspooned, complemented by pretty significant taste of ex-Chateau Latour cask, makes it a huge kind of a impact. And I loved it. I really, really loved it. So there we go.
I'm trying to remember. I think Burnside is the code name for the Glenfiddich-Balvenie combination.
I didn't say that.
You didn't say that. I'm saying it. But I love the nose on this one, too. It's very reminiscent of those two distilleries.
Yeah, I remember tasting a couple of times because, when you bring blend at the premium cost or premium price, I think it's like 63.8, you want to make sure that people don't turn away because of the price or high ABV, etc. So I tasted it like 3 or 4 times. I was getting some cedar notes, blackcurrant, some tobacco notes even, leather, tannins. And I think it's all, as you named those distilleries, they're kind of honey, softer style, and then you put them in this brick, and it gives you this nice kind of a additional layer of complexity, which I think turned into a nice symphony, that the fight that turns into something big.
What do you want to do with this collection over time?
I want to make sure, like, if the barrique had 250 bottles out of it as outcome, I want to make sure that all 250 people who, I would say, being lucky owners of that, enjoy it. As you see, I have a lot of bottles in my collection, and I bring more than I drink, even though I try to share it, I don't drink myself. So at some point, I started being very selective, as I'm being very selective when I decide which casks to bottle. I'm now deciding which bottles to leave in my collection. So the future will show, Mark, but I'd like to find some really, really nice single cask expressions of the distillers that never release their single malt under their own label, so they're getting lost in big brands, big blends, to be able to bring it to consumer to say, oh, I've never seen or never heard of Nc'Nean. Well, you tried it when you drank Johnny Walker. You just didn't realize it.
Right.
Or Blair Ethel with Bell's. I'm sure there are a lot of people who tried Bell's. So they did drink Blair Ethel. They just didn't know it was a Blair Ethel. That's the idea. The idea is to talk about the distilleries, about, their history, and enjoy the nice dram, the quality, not the quantity.
Thanks to Sam Filmus of ImpEx Beverages for spending some time with us this week on WhiskyCast In-Depth. It's brought to you by Glenallachie Irish Whiskey.
Our story begins in the wilds of County Wicklow, the Garden of Ireland, a place where nature moves slowly and meaningfully. Some whiskies blend in. Glendalough Double Barrel stands apart. I'm Rowdy Rooney, head distiller here at Glendalough, and I personally oversee our whiskey making process from start to finish. We do things slowly, and we do them right. We start with a smooth, single-grain Irish whiskey. We age it in flame-charred American oak for soft vanilla and a honeyed depth. Then we finish it in Oloroso casks from a small bodega in Spain. Casks we season and ship ourselves to make sure the wood is still alive with character when it arrives. That kind of care gives Glendalough Double Barrel its rich layers of dried fruit, warm spice and signature smoothness. This is a whiskey at its own pace, and it's worth every second. This is Glendalough Double Barrel, crafted to stand apart.
This week's tasting notes are brought to you by Lost Lantern Whiskey. Let's start off with the 2010 Nc'Nean 14-year-old single malt that we tasted during the interview with Sam Filmus. It's finished in a Margaux red wine barrique and bottled at 57.9% ABV. The nose is jammy with cooked fruits, raisins, and red grapes. The taste is jammy and spicy with clove and cinnamon, cooked fruits, red grapes, raisins, and a touch of oak tannins, and the finish is long and fruity with a hint of spice. I'm scoring the ImpEx Collection 2010 Nc'Nean a 93. We also tasted the Burnside blended malt finished in a Chateau Latour wine barrique. It's also 14 years old, and it's bottled at 63.8% ABV. The nose has touches of honey, red grapes, sawdust, dried fruits, and vanilla. The taste has notes of dark chocolate, black pepper, honey, vanilla, and dried fruits. The finish is long with lingering spice, and I'm scoring the Burnside blended malt from the ImpEx Collection a 92. Let's round things out now with the latest release from Bunnahabhain. An Cuan Gaurav is Scots Gaelic for the rough sea. It's part of Bunnahabhain's Westering Home Collection. It's 15 years old, finished in white port casks, and bottled at 51.6% ABV. The nose has green grapes, citrus fruits, heather, and honey. The taste has a nice balance of citrus, white pepper, apricots, and honey, while the finish is long and peppery. I'm scoring the Bunnahabhain Nc'Nean Gaurav a 92. This week's tasting notes are brought to you by Lost Lantern Whiskey and the United States of Bourbon, a groundbreaking blend of bourbons from all 50 states. Lost Lantern co-founders Nora Ganley Roper and Adam Polanski spent more than 5 years visiting distilleries to find bourbons worthy of representing each state. It's one of the most ambitious projects in American whiskey, and in keeping with Lost Lantern's commitment to full transparency, every one of the distilleries is listed on the label. Together, they create a singular portrait of the diversity, innovation, and character defining American whiskey today. Find out more at LostLanternWhiskey.com. Lost Lantern, shining a light on the independent spirit. Let's open up the inbox now and see what people are talking about this week. Darren in Chicago had a comment on last week's episode with Dewar's archivist Jackie Sargent. Enjoyed the pod this week and hearing from Jackie. Had to pull out the Dewar's. This one is always surprisingly rich and balanced. My only problem is I need another bottle. He included a photo of an almost empty bottle of Dewar's 21-year-old Double-Double. Joel in Iowa had this comment on last week's episode. I hope they see another 180 years. I hope all distilleries continue to grow and flourish for the longest time imaginable. The world needs whiskey. And Hugo Dart added this from Brazil. The work done by Jackie Sargent is very impressive and should definitely inspire other distilleries, old and new, to invest in a similar project. The culture of whiskey making is a meaningful part of our society and ought to be treated as such. And finally, Scott Rogers from Wisconsin had this comment on last week's show. When Mark started behind the label talking about the history of charming Haddonfield's dry status, I thought it was going to be because the town's current leaders had voted to go wet. While I don't have an opinion about what the local government of a far-off town in a different state should do, I'm glad that the familiar WhiskyCast tagline won't be changing. Not changing any time in the near future, Scott. If you have something you'd like to share, whether it's a comment, question, or a suggestion, we'd love to hear from you. Download the free WhiskyCast community app from your app store and join the conversation. You can also find us on X, Threads, Blue Sky, Instagram, and Facebook at WhiskyCast, and the email address is comments@whiskycast.com. Let's close out the show now with Behind the Label, our look at the history, science, and people who make whiskey unique. Ever wondered what people are talking about when they say a whiskey has good legs? Well, they're talking about the droplets of liquid that form and drip down the inside of a glass after you swirl it. Legs can be a good indicator of several characteristics of a whiskey. For instance, legs that are larger and slower usually indicate that a whiskey is higher in proof, and the same trait can mean that the whiskey is heavier or more oily, which can be a sign of an older whiskey. On the other hand, thin, fast-moving legs usually suggest a younger, lighter, or lower-proof whiskey. What causes legs, though? Well, physicists call it the Marangoni effect. It's not a chemical reaction, but a physical one, based on the difference in evaporation rates between the alcohol and the water in the whiskey. When you swirl, a thin film of whiskey coats the inside of the glass. The alcohol evaporates first, leaving mostly water behind. Since water has a higher surface tension than alcohol, surface tension pulls the liquid up towards the top of the glass. But gravity outweighs surface tension in the physical world, and the liquid runs back down the glass and causes the legs to show up. Legs are also a good way to tell whether a whiskey has been chill filtered or not. Chill filtering removes some of the viscosity of a whiskey by pulling out the natural fatty acids, esters, and proteins. So when you swirl a chill-filtered whiskey, the liquid is more watery, even if the ABV is high. The lack of drag from the oils causes the liquid to drip down the inside of the glass more quickly and leave thinner, lesser-defined legs. A non-chill-filtered whiskey will be oilier and have legs that take longer to form and travel down the sides of a glass. Legs don't measure the quality of a whiskey, but they do give us a way to gauge the proof, age, and filtration of a whiskey. If there's something you'd like us to look at on an upcoming episode, just get in touch with us. That's all for this episode of WhiskyCast. You'll find links for the stories in this episode in our show notes at whiskycast.com. That's also where you can find the latest whiskey news, my tasting notes, the calendar of events, the whiskey photo of the week, and, of course, a complete archive of past episodes going all the way back to 2005. Please remember to leave a 5-star rating or review for WhiskyCast in your favorite podcast app. That helps other whiskey lovers discover the show. We'd love to hear from you. Download the free WhiskyCast community app from your app store. Look for us on all of the major social media platforms or just email us. The address is comments@whiskycast.com. WhiskyCast is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2026, and comes to you from the charming, yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you next week.